I don't really know where to start, but I'll try my best to put everything together. I'm a 34-year-old woman who lost my uncle a couple of weeks ago after his battle with pancreatic cancer. The doctors did what they could, but it was too late by the time he was diagnosed, and unfortunately it wasn't enough. He was 55 when he passed. He and I were extremely close growing up. He was like a second father to me, and we always joked that we were pretty much the same person. He was my mom's younger brother, and we shared a unique bond that no one else in the family really understood. But after he married Meredith and moved away with her and their 2 kids, Kevin and Sarah, we drifted apart over the years. When they first started dating, I was in my early teens, and I remember feeling uncomfortable with her. Meredith was always distant, always looking down on everyone. She had this air of superiority that rubbed most of us the wrong way. But my uncle was head over heels for her. After dating for 2 years, they got married, and soon after, they had kids. But despite all of that, something never felt right about her. They were married for almost 16 years before the inevitable happened. Meredith cheated on my uncle. He caught her with her boss, and even though he tried to make it work, she filed for divorce. It was a bitter ending, and I watched my uncle get torn apart. He still loved her, but she didn't want anything to do with him anymore. After the divorce, he made the difficult decision to leave that state behind and come back to where he grew up. But that decision had a price. He had to distance himself from his kids. Kevin and Sarah, both teenagers by that point, chose to stay with Meredith, and according to the custody agreement, my uncle was entitled to visitation. However, the kids wanted nothing to do with him. Meredith had painted him as the villain, turning their minds against him. She spun the narrative that he was toxic, and the only reason she stayed married to him for as long as she did was because of the kids. But after everything, she couldn't take it anymore. Even after he moved back here, my uncle couldn't fix the relationship with his kids. The damage had been done, and he didn't get to see them much. He was heartbroken, but he didn't let it show too much. He focused on his health, work, and reconnecting with family, though it wasn't the same. A few months ago, when my uncle's health started declining faster, I moved in with him to care for him. His kids didn't want to be involved, even though I reached out to them several times to let them know how bad it was getting. They never responded. It was painful, but I wasn't going to let him go through it alone. For reasons I still don't fully understand, his kids completely bought the story. Even though I can't imagine someone as quiet, kind, and reserved as my uncle ever doing anything to make them turn on their own father. But somehow, Meredith managed to manipulate them into cutting him out of their lives entirely. Right up to his final moments, he kept trying to reach out to them, hoping for even a word back. I even tried messaging them on social media after his diagnosis, thinking they might at least respond then. But nothing. They ignored every attempt. For the last decade, my uncle had been living just a few blocks away from me and my family. He and I were really close when I was younger, so once he moved back, we made a point to reconnect. He was going through a rough time, and I think he needed us more than he could admit. Slowly, he started opening up about what really happened, how Meredith had isolated him from everyone, including us. She convinced him we'd always disliked her and made him feel like we looked down on her, even though that couldn't be further from the truth. Honestly, the tension was mutual. We were civil, but she never made an effort to connect either. What broke my heart most was learning that she'd also forced him to give up his dream of being a writer. She knew writing was his passion from the start, but she still pushed him into sales because she didn't believe writing would ever be a stable career. He never liked the job, and because his income depended on commission, he struggled a lot. But with a family to support, he didn't have the luxury to quit. That pressure turned into resentment in their marriage. Still, he tried. He gave up everything he loved just to make it work. And despite all of that, Meredith eventually cheated on him and left. The worst part? Their kids took her side and abandoned him too. That wrecked him. And honestly, it crushed me to see someone so kind end up so alone. That's why I made it my mission to be there for him however I could. Over the past 10 years, I got married, had a baby, and through it all, we kept him close. He wasn't just an uncle to me, he was a real friend. Someone who understood me in ways few others did. So when we found out it was pancreatic cancer, I knew we didn't have much time. I made sure to visit him every single evening after work, spending at least an hour and a half with him, and on weekends my parents and family would come too. He had a nurse to care for his physical needs, but I knew what he really needed was someone there emotionally. Someone who made him feel like he still mattered. We were there until the end, and I truly believe we helped him feel loved again. I never expected anything in return. I did it because he was important to me, because he deserved that. I truly feel grateful that he chose to leave his entire inheritance to me. I only found out a few days ago when his lawyer reached out, and to be honest, I was completely unaware of how much wealth he had quietly built over the past decade. According to the lawyer, he had been working as a ghostwriter after moving back. Contrary to what he told us about being a day trader, he lived so modestly that none of us had any idea how much money he had tucked away. Naturally, I was touched, not just because the inheritance could secure a solid future for my child, but because it showed just how deeply he cared. It was a truly thoughtful gesture. Of course, that's when the vultures started circling. Word spread quickly, and it wasn't long before his family started sniffing around, hoping to grab a piece of the estate. Just 2 days ago, my parents told me that Meredith, her much younger boyfriend, who, quite frankly, looks more like her son, and her kids showed up at their house uninvited. They demanded to speak with someone, either my parents or my uncle's lawyer, because they hadn't been contacted about the will and found that very suspicious. My parents didn't entertain their antics for even a second and threatened to call the police if they didn't leave. Afterward, they filled me in, and honestly, I couldn't believe the audacity. How could they seriously expect to be included after how they treated him? Naturally, after hearing they had shown up at my parents' home, I figured it was only a matter of time before they came looking for me. And sure enough, they did. They somehow tracked down my address and showed up at my door yesterday. But their approach with me was completely different. Meredith and her children came bearing guilt and apologies. She claimed she was there because she wanted to make amends. Supposedly, she had finally come to terms with the fact that she treated my uncle poorly and had no right to estrange him from his own children. Kevin and Sarah were right beside her, nodding along and even shedding a few tears, saying they deeply regretted cutting their father out of their lives. They explained that after his passing, Meredith had finally come clean about the real reasons behind their parents' divorce. At first, they were upset with her, but eventually they forgave her, and now they were just here to pay their respects. It was a convenient turnaround, to say the least. The tension in the room was palpable as I stared them down, the faint smile on my face barely concealing my irritation. I knew exactly what they were after, and it wasn't the supposed closure they claimed to want. It was the money, the inheritance my uncle had left behind. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "I don't know why you're even bothering with this charade," I said, my voice steady and calm, but with an edge of sarcasm. "You've had months to reach out, and now, all of a sudden, you're here acting like you care about what's left of his estate? Come on, don't insult my intelligence." Meredith's face remained unreadable, but I could tell I had struck a nerve. "You don't understand," she started, her voice faltering slightly. "We had our differences, yes, but after everything he's been through, I just wanted to make peace, you know?" She avoided my gaze as she spoke, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. I wasn't buying it, not for a second. "Peace," I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "The only peace you want is a cut of whatever he left behind. And you think I don't know about the conversations you had with my parents, about the inheritance being your main concern? You didn't even try to reach out until now, and you think I'm just going to pretend like nothing's wrong." They exchanged a quick, uncomfortable glance before my uncle's children, Kevin and Sarah, started to stammer excuses. "It wasn't like that," Kevin said quickly, his voice defensive. "We just didn't know where to begin. And then when we heard about the will, Enough," I cut him off. "You can stop playing the victim. I already know the truth. This isn't about family or closure for you. This is about the money." Kevin's face turned red, and Sarah crossed her arms tightly over her chest, her usual calm demeanor replaced with a hard look. "You don't get to lecture us," she snapped. "We have every right to ask what's left. He was our father, and we deserve something after everything he went through. You weren't even a part of his life until recently. Who do you think you are, to say otherwise. I felt a wave of frustration build, but I stayed calm. "I'm not here for a fight," I said coldly. "But if you're here expecting me to hand over information that would benefit you, you're in for a rude awakening." I paused, letting the words sink in. "You're wasting your time, because whatever's in the will has nothing to do with you." They looked taken aback, but I could tell they weren't ready to back down just yet. "You can't possibly be serious," Meredith said, her tone sharp, though she tried to keep her voice steady. "There's no way he'd leave us out entirely. We've been through too much for him to just forget about us. And as for you, Scarlett, you can't just dismiss us like that." "Don't push me," I said, leaning forward. "I've been the one who took care of him. I'm the one who stayed by his side when he needed someone, and now you come in pretending to care? It's insulting." My voice dropped to a whisper, but the intensity was clear. "You don't know him like I do. He didn't trust you. And when the will is read, you'll see just how little he cared about whatever you think you're entitled to." Meredith and Kevin exchanged looks again, their masks slipping. "You don't know everything," Kevin muttered. "You don't know what he said to us." I didn't flinch. "I know enough. And as for the house, he may have talked about leaving it to you, but that's not how he felt in the end. The lawyer isn't contacting you because you're not part of the picture. Accept it. And if you really think he left anything substantial for you, I'm not the one you need to convince." The silence in the room was thick, charged with resentment and unspoken truths. It was clear they had underestimated me, assuming that I was just some naive relative they could push around. But now they saw how wrong they were. When they brought all that up, it hit me. They had actually read every single one of those emails over the years. They just chose to ignore them. And something about that realization pushed me over the edge. I snapped. I told them straight up that they were wrong. My uncle hadn't left them a dime, and honestly, that's exactly what they deserved. I reminded them how Kevin and Sarah had treated their father like dirt for the past 10 years. They're in their 20s now. They're not kids anymore. They fully understand what they did, and they made those choices on their own. Showing up now only after he died, just to get a piece of the inheritance? That's all the proof anyone needs about who they really are. And honestly, it's not even surprising. Their mother, Meredith, is cut from the same cloth. She poisoned them against their own dad just so she could get custody and bleed him dry with child support. She didn't get a cent of alimony because my uncle's lawyers were smart enough to bring up the fact that she cheated on him. But of course, even that wasn't enough for her. No, she had to ruin everything. Force him into a job he hated, cut him off from everyone who cared about him, and cheat on him with her boss. And even after doing all that, she had the audacity to show up after his death, just to grab more money. And the worst part? Kevin and Sarah knew all of this. They knew exactly what kind of person Meredith was, and they still stood by her. They weren't there to grieve. They weren't there to make amends. They were there for one reason, to cash in. I told them they should be ashamed of themselves, but even shame wasn't enough. Not now, because my uncle is gone. He died believing that his own children didn't care about him. That's why he left everything to me. So no, they weren't getting a single cent. I told them they could go ahead and take it to court if they wanted to. But I warned them they'd lose, because anyone with an ounce of sense could see they didn't deserve anything from him. Then I slammed the door in their faces. They stood outside yelling, demanding that I open up. I told them flatly that I was going to call the police, and unlike my parents, I meant it. Eventually, they left. And honestly, I felt good about it. For everything they had put my uncle through, this was the least I could do for him. He never got the closure he needed, but I got a little piece of it when I finally let all of that out. I don't regret it, not for a second. But I'll admit it stirred things up. My mom's been a little annoyed with me ever since, mostly because after that confrontation, Kevin and Sarah went into full meltdown mode. They started blowing up my phone with messages and emails. Non-stop. And not just me. My parents, grandparents, even some extended relatives, they've all been bombarded. We keep blocking them, but they just keep making new accounts and coming back. I don't even know how they're doing it so fast. It's only been about 24 hours, and I've already gotten over 1,000 texts and emails. And from what I've heard, My parents and grandparents are getting the same treatment. We might have been able to overlook everything up until this point, but about an hour ago, they crossed a new line. They actually created a Facebook account specifically to go after me. They've started posting long-winded rants about how terribly I treated them, dragging my name through the mud. Worse still, they dredged up old grievances, accusing my mother of being cruel to Meredith back when she first started dating my uncle. According to their narrative, Meredith had no choice but to cut ties with our family to protect herself and her kids from our toxic influence. They're painting themselves as helpless victims, claiming that my family and I brainwashed my uncle into leaving everything to me and abandoning his own children. Never mind the fact that they completely ignored him when he was dying, or that Meredith cheated on him and actively turned the kids against him afterward. None of that fits their version of the story, so they conveniently leave it out. Naturally, no one's really buying what they're selling, but that hasn't stopped them from tagging people in these posts. Friends, extended family, even my in-laws are being dragged into this mess. A few of our close friends reached out, confused and concerned, and now we're stuck explaining the real story and asking everyone to block them. It's not the end of the world, but it's incredibly frustrating. Just exhausting. My mom, of course, is livid with me. She sat me down and grilled me for half an hour earlier, saying none of this would have happened if I just ignored them from the start. According to her, I should have called the cops like she did, not yelled at them or rubbed anything in their faces. But honestly, I disagree. I needed to say what I said. I needed them to hear just how much I hated what they did to my uncle, someone who meant the world to me and never got a chance to truly tell them off himself. They deserved to hear it, and I'm glad I got to be the one to speak on his behalf. I don't even regret rubbing the inheritance in their faces. Maybe it was harsh, but it was real. And now they've made fools of themselves online, which only makes it easier if we decide to go the legal route. My husband agrees with me. We could easily threaten a lawsuit and shut them down. Honestly, I just needed to vent and get some outside perspective on whether I was really in the wrong here. So, Reddit. Am I the asshole for confronting my uncle's estranged family, yelling at them for how they treated him, and letting them know that he left everything to me, and nothing to them? I understand that this situation has been incredibly emotional for you. Losing someone close to you, especially when their final days were overshadowed by abandonment and neglect, can leave a deep wound. Your uncle wasn't just a relative, he was a mentor and a friend, someone you held dear. And to see his children, who had turned their backs on him during his time of need, come around now, expecting something from him, must have felt like an unbearable betrayal. You've been through a lot in terms of caring for your uncle, and I can see why you'd be so frustrated with how things unfolded. You were there for him when no one else was, and it's understandable that his children's sudden interest in his estate would trigger your emotions. They had no right to demand anything from someone they had treated with such disregard, especially when they had been absent during the hardest time of his life. Their hypocrisy is not something to take lightly. I can also understand how your emotions took over in that moment. After all, you were mourning the loss of someone who meant so much to you. Screaming at them, even though it might not have been the most controlled response, was a natural reaction to the injustice you were witnessing. You were standing up for your uncle, for the love and care he deserved, but didn't get from his own children. Talking it out with your mom is a step in the right direction. It's important to have that support, and it's clear she understands where you're coming from. It's great that you were able to have that conversation and come to an understanding. At the end of the day, what matters most is that you were there for your uncle when no one else was. The bond you shared with him was special, and no one can take that away from you. While the situation with your uncle's family might not resolve easily, it's important to remember that your actions came from a place of love, and you were standing up for him in a way that no one else did. You did the right thing by standing up for someone who was neglected and making sure his memory is respected. Speaking of them, I recently uncovered some interesting information that finally explains how they managed to get my home address, despite the fact that I never gave it to them and neither did my parents or anyone else in our circle. Turns out they didn't need help from anyone. Apparently, Meredith's new boyfriend is an ethical hacker. Well, was an ethical hacker, because what he's done is definitely not ethical by any stretch of the imagination. It also makes a lot of sense now, how they were able to keep harassing us online, creating account after account, bypassing blocks, and staying one step ahead. I discovered all of this while casually stalking Meredith on social media. She still has a public account, which is laughable, considering her boyfriend's supposed to be some cybersecurity expert, and she had posted a bunch of pictures with him. Honestly, it's disturbing. She's dating a guy who looks barely a few years older than her own son. And it's just plain stupid that she leaves her account wide open, especially when she's involved with someone in tech security. You'd think she'd at least know that much. Anyway, once I had his name, I found his profile on LinkedIn since his Instagram was private. That's how I found out where he works. An IT company that specializes in cybersecurity audits. According to his profile, he's responsible for testing and identifying vulnerabilities in secure systems. The irony is almost too much. After talking it over with my mom and my husband, we decided I should report him. His employer deserves to know that he's abusing his access and skills for personal harassment. Regardless of whether he's doing it on work time or in his own time, it reflects horribly on the company. Someone who weaponizes their tech knowledge like that isn't trustworthy. And I'm pretty confident they'll take disciplinary action. So yes, I sent the email. And I'm honestly looking forward to seeing how they react when the tables turn. I sent the report 2 days ago. At first, nothing happened. But today, everything changed. The barrage of emails, DMs, and spam accounts suddenly stopped. I don't know if the guy was fired or warned or what, but their entire operation just vanished. Even the fake social media account they had created to trash us and paint us as the villains? Gone. Wiped clean. Then, this morning, Meredith and her kids showed up at our front door, livid. They started shouting about how I had caused chaos in their lives. Apparently, I was boasting about the inheritance I stole from them, which, for the record, is nonsense. You can't steal something that was never yours to begin with. Then came the real reason for their meltdown. They found out I sent that email to her boyfriend's company. And they were furious, screaming about how I ruined his career and created unnecessary drama. But let's be real, what they call unnecessary drama, I call consequences. Actions have them. Apparently, after I sent that email, Meredith's boyfriend ended up facing some real consequences. His company reached out and HR got involved, not something they took lightly. Even though I didn't have hard proof to back up every word, the fact that he was connected to someone like Meredith, and that she somehow had my address despite me stating in the email that no one had shared it with her, definitely raised red flags. I don't think he lost his job, though part of me wishes he had, but he did get officially reprimanded, which seemed to be enough to make him rethink things. Not long after, he flew back home and broke up with Meredith. Naturally, she blamed me for that, as if I was the one who forced her to send her boyfriend out to do her dirty work. It was all on her. This time, I didn't waste a single second trying to reason with them. The moment they showed up again, screaming, of course, I went inside and called the police. Within 30 minutes, they were being escorted off my property. Their behavior didn't help their case. Kevin, for some reason, thought it would be smart to threaten me in front of the cops. I'm not sure what got into him, but that moment sealed it. We immediately decided to file for a restraining order against all 3 of them. Enough was enough. Fast forward to now. It's been a month since that chaos, and thankfully, things have calmed down. We were granted a 2-year restraining order against Meredith and her kids, so that's one major win. A few days after everything went down, I got an email from Meredith's, now ex-boyfriend. He didn't mention anything directly, but it was clearly an apology, vague, smartly worded, no details, no admission. Still, I think it was his way of saying he knew he was in the wrong. I didn't reply. I had no reason to. This wasn't about him anyway, it was always about Meredith and her kids. And honestly, I think justice has been served. They're not getting a single cent from my uncle's estate. Not even 50 cents. After everything they did to him, and to me, that feels like the most fitting outcome. I didn't need to scream at them this time. I let the law do it for me.